spoilers ahead for any non-manga readers for One Piece. So at this point, the Wano Country arc, it looks like we're gonna get the last courses of the full course. Things are really picking up with major fights, and it looks like we get some major reveals that are gonna drop as well in the very near future. I've guessed personally that Wano Country is gonna end this year. This year, 2021, will be the end of the Wano Country arc. Especially now that I see Oda's uptake in pace, where we're seeing fewer breaks as of late. That I think is a good sign for Wano Country to slowly come to an end. And my guess is, again, later this year, 2021, let's say Q4, November, December, or potentially next year, 2022, Q1, Q2. Some of that sort. Because we really are getting into like the midst of the most meatiest dishes of the full course at this point in time. So, on that note, I'm gonna undo Austin Seals.
Release control art restriction 0.
And release him, because guess what? We have some very important upcoming Zoro content to talk about. And if you're here, I'm assuming that you're a manga reader. I'm gonna undo your seals. If you're Orochimaru and your hands are sealed, I'm gonna unseal them for you. And make sure you use those hands to click on that like button, if you like your boy's content, of course. Subscribe, that'd be great. And click on that bell to join the notification squad. Muchas gracias.
Okay.
So now that the coast is clear, manga readers rejoice. Let's get right into it. Because at this point, when it comes to the Straw Hats, the only major fights that are left are the Monster Trio fights. And for this video, we're gonna be focusing on Zoro, and why the recent reveals in chapter 1023 may make us never see Zoro in the same light ever again. This is gonna be a hefty big boy vid.
Saddle up, Seabiscuit.
So saddle up. And if you're sticking around for the entire video, congratulations, I will mail you a cookie. I promise. I promise. So on that note, let's get into how this could be potentially great, good, maybe even bad for Ronor Zoro. So, first of all, what was said in chapter 1023? When Kawamatsu talks to Hyogoro, he says, Bosso Goro, when Lady Hiri told me she was going to give that man Enma, there was a reason I couldn't bring myself to stop her. Hyogoro responds, yes, I understand. He is a pirate from across the sea, and yet, strangely enough, he's the spitting image of Shimotsuki Ushimaru, daimyo of Ringo in his youth. Precisely. Even his style with the sword is the same. Lord Ushimaru was a descendant of Shimotsuki Ryuma, the god of the blade. Add to the fact that he returned Shusui to Wano, I cannot help but feel that fate is at work. Especially when you consider that Ryuma was also a one-eyed samurai. And after we get all of this about Ushimaru, we actually potentially see the man in chapter 1024, the next chapter, where we have the Yamato flashback, of course. And what we see Ushimaru do in this chapter is pretty dope stuff. Be it Chad. Samurai, they don't get hungry. They fast repeatedly for their diets. That's why they're so goddamn healthy. That's very impressive. Very studly. But on top of that, Ushimaru, we see him use two swords to help destroy the bow that was sealing the cave that he was in. And we also see that he has bandages over his left eye. And it's safe to assume that his left eye was damaged and not actually destroyed. Very similar to Zoro or Ryoma, with their left eyes also gone. So now when we look at Ushimaru's back, we do see, of course, the two-sword symbol of the Shimotsuki clan. We've seen it repeatedly in Wano, of course, through flashbacks in real time, but what's most important is knowing that it's the same symbol we see in the Zoro flashback in Chapter 5, the Shimotsuki village. Of course, folks know this by now, but it was noted too by Oda in SBS Volume 96 that Shimotsuki Kozuboro founded the Shimotsuki village sometime after he forged Enma. His son, Koshiro, was Zoro's master, who was also Kuina's father. Kozuburo, the man that created Enma, his granddaughter was Kuina. On top of that, according to Oda, the old man that taught Zoro Sinachu, the very thing that Kiku was wondering how Momonosuke knew that word, was taught to Zoro by Kozuburo himself. And of course, finally, a very, very big thing here, but not just for the reasons what you might think. So again, stick around, it's gonna get hefty. Because Kozaburo is also the man who not only made Enma, but also Warichimonji, and because of their relationship, Zoro was able to actually gain a quicker grasp and insight on how to use Enma than what he should have, because of his usage of, again, Warichimonji. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg. But these, in a general sense, are the things that we know. And it's starting to get clearer and clearer, the wheel of fate that is turning for Zoro. But we can speculate. Of course, we can speculate even further beyond. Is to go even further beyond. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is to go even further beyond.
So, how fast can the Wheel of Fate spin for Zoro? So the first gear for Zoro's Wheel of Fate. Once again, the Shimotsuki emblem is two swords that are crossing each other like so. And we know that Shimotsuki Ushimaru was a wielder, a practitioner of two swords. We see that in the flashback, of Yamato flashback. Plus, we know so far that Kozaburo only, so far at least, only has made two swords. Now, obviously, we're not talking about regular average swords. We're talking about famed blades. We're talking about metos. And those two swords that he made as Shimotsuki wind up in Zoro's hands. Now, we know that Zoro got accustomed to using two swords rather than three swords when he was much younger, because we see in chapter 5, the Zoro flashback, when he was defeated by Kuina for the 2000th time, it is noted to him using two swords. He challenged her with two swords. It is specifically noted that he was using two swords. He even challenges Kuina, at the time his rival of course, with two real swords while she uses one real sword. It's not until her death via the all-powerful Yonko level fall down D stairs that Zoro grabs her sword and begins his training in the Santoryu style. But the next thing here is, and this is very interesting, is that when Zoro fought against Brook Ryoma, of course, the body of his potential ancestor, he fought against him with two swords. Not three, two swords. Zoro wished he could have used all three of his swords against Brook Ryoma, but Ueshiri was destroyed during the Enies Lobby arc. And in a symbolic way, in hindsight, it's like a fight between the older gen and the newer gen. Like a Shimotsuki what if. Like, what if Ushimaru fought against Ryuma? And Zoro, by defeating Brook Ryoma with the two sword style, and getting his third new sword at the time, Shusui, now, in hindsight, seems even more fitting. Yes, sir. Remember what Kawamatsu said in chapter 1023, that Ushimaru's style of fighting, his kenjutsu, was similar to Zoro's style of fighting, if not identical. But again, from what we can gather in the next chapter, 1024, Ushimaru was a two-sword style fighter, not a three-sword style fighter. And there were plenty of swords to grab, but he grabbed two, not three. Maybe because, he was fasting for so long, he got scurvy and some of his teeth fell out, so he couldn't bite on as hard. I think it's pushing it. So, in the safe side, because we like the safe side, on the safe side of things, Ushimaru, again, was a two-sword practitioner. So if we take this logic completely with Kawamatsu based on Ushimaru, the basis of all Zoro's Nitoryu skills, techniques, could be from Ushimaru's / of course, the Shimotsuki way of Kenjutsu, swordsmanship. Whether it is the Rashomon, whether it is the Samon, yo, I love that! The Toro Samon against Hawkins. I love that, yo. That yell is hilarious. Like you go into the market to get some Samon! Love it, love it, love it. But the basis of all of these skills that he uses via the Nitoryu are the Shimotsuki Kenjutsu swordsmanship way. That is in direct lockstep with what Ushimaru was doing back in the day. And what's even more interesting is when we go and review Wano Country so far and Zoro's journey so far in this arc, when we look at Zoro's most prominent fights in Wano Country, and I mean on Wano Country soil, not Onigashima, on Wano Country soil. So Hawkins, Killer slash Kamazo, Kyoshiro slash Denjiro, Zoro predominantly fights with 2 swords. Not 3, 2. And then on top of that, his situation with Yasue and his daughter Toko is also, in part, a Shimotsuki situation, since that's what they are. Yasue is a Shimotsuki clan member, and Toko, she's adopted. But still, nonetheless, Shimotsuki. So you can see in this sense here that Zoro, in a way, is the representative of the Shimotsuki samurai slash Ushimaru in this situation. Because again, the vast majority of the time he fights while he's on Wano Country soil is with the 2-sword style, not 3. Only one time wasn't even a sword, it was a sickle. But for the most part, it was Nitoryu all the way through on Wano Country soil. So you can see now how Oda is leaving these details and making the wheel of fate spin really rapidly for Roronoa Zoro. Now, can the wheel of fate spin even faster?
You're goddamn right.
Yes, yes it can. Let's go gear second for the wheel of fate for Zoro. Again, Kawamatsu's words are specific about Zoro's sword style being like Ushimaru's. And again, he's a 2-sword practitioner. But Zoro has 2 other major styles of fighting: Santoryu and Itoryu.
Oh yeah.
If the basis of Zoro's Nitoryu is potentially tied to the Shimotsuki roots, then why not his Itoryu?
It's all coming together.
It makes a pretty solid degree of sense. I'll argue absolutely. Because the primary example for this would not just be Ryoma, who was a 1-sword practitioner, as far as we understand, but also Kuina herself. It is very possible that at the Shimotsuki village in East Blue, they taught both sword styles, the Itoryu and the Nitoryu sword styles. Of course, the basis of the hypothetical Shimotsuki 1 and 2 sword styles, Zoro has modified and changed over the course of his time as a bounty hunter, and of course, with his time with the Straw Hats and Luffy. It may have been the reason why they noted to specifically that Zoro used 2 swords, and he also Kuina that used 1 sword for their 2000th match. At a young age, Kuina was so proficient with her 1-sword style that even Zoro, who could beat adults, couldn't beat her for 2,000 matches. The foundation of her sword skill, of course, as well as her blood ties, but again, more so the foundation of her skill, is probably rooted in Ryoma's style of swordsmanship. Now, there are some problems here, some hiccups here, where number 1, I wouldn't want to use the wanted one-shot directly for this. You could, but I think it's a bit too loose for that, number 1. Number 2 is that when Zoro fights against Ryoma, it's not Ryoma, of course, it's Brook Ryoma. It is Brook's soul, his shadow, in Ryoma's body modified as a corpse. So the sword style and the core of that was all Brook, not really Ryoma. So it's hard to gauge what that would be, but I think it's very, very possible that what Kuina was doing, that core swordsmanship, was probably what Ryoma had brought to the pinnacle. But moving on from that, I think it's a safe assumption to make that Koshiro learned a lot of the sword knowledge that he knows, like the breath of all things. Swordsmen who can't cut through anything, but those same men can cut through iron. It's a very safe bet, I think, that he learned these things from his father, Kozaburo. And ironically enough, Ironically enough, in the same flashback and moment, the realization of the breath that Zoro does is in one of, if not his most iconic attack, the Lion Song against Mr. One and Itoryu. And in hindsight, you have to wonder, where did Zoro hear the idea from about people being able to cut through iron in the first place? You have to wonder, because he was the one that brought it up to Koshiro in the first place. And I have my suspicions that old geezer Kozaburo was telling Zoro a lot of crazy stories, especially and particularly the stories about the samurai in Wano Country long before we heard about Wano Country in the series itself. But we can go even further beyond. Furthermore, when you look back at the post-time skip so far, Zoro has only done a handful of Itoryu skills, and the two most prominent ones he's done have both been with Shusui, Ryoma's blade. Both of them. The first one, the Death Line song, where he cuts off a dragon's head, mimicking the eye-catching panel of Ryoma in the Wanted one-shot when he cuts off the dragon's head. Number two, the second, is against Monet with the Great Dragon Shock. And of course, Zoro just so happens to do this in front of Tashigi, a swordswoman, and of course, as we all know, the person who looks very similar to Kuina. And also someone born in East Blue, and it makes you wonder, does she have ties to the Shimotsuki village? These are the two most prominent Itoryu attacks, skills, techniques that Zoro has used in the entirety of the post-time skip, and both of them just happen to be with Metal Shusui. Both. And keep in mind that Punk Hazard, the arc where both these attacks take place in, is an arc that has a lot of connections to the current Wano Country arc. With that all being realized, it seems to me, and in a general sense, his son Toryu, at its core, is a blend of the two styles of Kenjutsu swordsmanship that are the foundation of the Shimotsuki clan way of fighting. Which is why Kawamatsu could see Ushimaru's way of fighting in Zoro despite Zoro fighting using 3 swords against King the Wildfire. The same thing would go for Hiri when he fought against Kamazo/Killer at the time. Heft! It has some girth to it, it has some meat to it. Let's go! It's a fat turkey. Objection! It's gonna be a delicious Thanksgiving. But we'll get to that real soon. Because, unfortunately, with this information at hand, we have to slow down the wheel of fate for Zoro for a bit. Pull on the brakes real quick and ask the question. Is this good? You see, when you think about things in this way, it almost feels as if Zoro was fated, destined to get Shusui or Enma, return Shusui to the resting place of Ryoma. And ultimately, it feels like Zoro is fated, not just through his own efforts, but in a way inherited to be the world's greatest swordsman. After all, one of his potential ancestors was the Sword God. The Sword God. And according to Sandman of AP Arlong Park on Twitter, Viz didn't translate the line about Ushimaru quite well. Apparently, the Viz media translation, they missed the part where they mentioned that he was a Daikengo, or a great swordsman. That's kind of crazy because it does, once again, bolster the idea, based on all these details that we're getting, again, they're all potential, of course, but based on all these details, it seems like Zoro was, once again, destined to be this great, / become the greatest swordsman, and even potentially destined to get a lot of these power-ups. It also kind of flies in the face a little bit of Kuina's circumstances, as a girl who was bound to be weaker than the men at swordsmanship because of the natural physical differences between men and women. In a way, in a very sad way, all of these potential ties for Zoro's fate of greatness is kind of proving that Kuina, if she were alive to this day, she'd be lagging behind her male counterparts. Plus, it's also kind of compound on the fact that we don't really have any noticeably powerful swords women to date. Even in Wano, especially at this junction to the end game of the series. Not a single powerful, what I would say, a true swords woman. Someone like a Mihawk, someone like a Zoro, someone like any of the samurai really, who is a powerful swords woman. I would not count, I definitely wouldn't count Big Mom or Smoothie. No. Because what those two are is something far, far, far greater than just swords women. Absolutely. And you could argue, well, there's Kiku. But Kiku gets complicated for very obvious reasons. So I will not go down that rabbit hole. So let's double back to safety, because I like safety. Zoro himself has also held back against women since the time skip. Monet is the core example, and that should not be the case considering the fact that it's a slight against, you can argue, Kuina's memory to hold back against a woman in combat. But the idea of Zoro's greatness faded in a way, and the Shimotsuki ties, they sound very familiar. Yes, they do. Especially if you were a part of a particular fandom a few years back. The Naruto fans, yes. And recently during my streams, I've been seeing and I've been talking to a few Naruto fans that also read One Piece, and particularly their concerns with the One Piece series at this point in time, now that a lot of the inherited will / destiny aspects of the series are now coming towards the forefront. Because of course, in this group of people that read One Piece, that are former Naruto fans, the scars still remain from the last parts of Naruto. They absolutely do. And trust me, I can understand the feeling. Oh, yes, I absolutely can. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. But at its root, I really think that the concepts of destiny, fate, inherited will in One Piece are fundamentally different, and to be quite frank, just written way better than what we get in Naruto. One of the main things here is the level of detail and forethought that Oda has seemingly put into this from potentially chapter 5 of One Piece with Zoro. But again, if these potential threads of fate are genuine, of course, if they're actually true, if, always potentially. Always. Okay. There is only one last thing I can think that's very, very important to fully understanding the Wheel of Fate, inherited will, for Zoro. 1. What the hell is Asura? What the hell is Asura? You see, right now, when I think of Asura, I can't help but think about the atavism of the Mozoku in Yu Yu Hakusho. Shoutouts. The attributes of ancestors resurfacing generations later. That's what I'm thinking about right now. The idea is also bolstered by Enma's unique situation, because the idea of what Kinemon said that Enma is, a sword that draws out the wielder's haki. But then Kaido claiming that in that sword he can sense the presence of Odin. These two things are, I would argue, completely at odds with one another. Zoro's haki would not or should not bear the presence of Odin, especially if Zoro has more ties to the Shimotsuki clan rather than the Kozuki clan. Are Zoro and Monosuke related? Zoro and Momonosuke related? Yeah? Yeah? I had my doubts. I'm gonna put a big fat doubt on that one. Absolutely. So whether or not Enma has kept residual haki of Oden within itself, or maybe Enma is, by taking Zoro's haki, is somehow mimicking, copying the haki of Oden, the very thing that was wounding Kaido with the scabbards, which would be the haki that Luffy has been using, the real haki, advanced real haki. Maybe it's something of that sort, where the sword allows him to do that. The details of this whole thing with Enma are still unclear, and hopefully in this fight against King, we do get full clarification as to what's going on exactly. But you can take the concept of Oden's presence / haki still residing within Enma to a capacity in some way, and we can apply this idea on a greater scale. Atavize it. Is that even a word? I have no idea. The atavism of the Mozoku. If Ryoma was 1, Itoryu, Ushimaru is 2, Nitoryu, Zoro is 3, Santoryu. All 3 men with 1 eye. Yes. Asura. Honestly, I'm thinking about Zoro's Asura form right now. Right now. Right now. Yes! It's wild. It's crazy. And honestly, it might give a lot of Naruto fans who read One Piece a heart attack. Yes, that's very possible. That's very possible. But if true gods do not exist in One Piece, which you can argue that they don't, and yet we do know that One Piece does have a very strong soul / life force component to it, then take the potential theory / concept of Oden's life force / soul residing in some capacity, Enma, then maybe you can apply that to Zoro with Ushimaru and Ryoma for what manifests ultimately as what we perceive to be the demon god Asura. At the end of the day, we can infer a lot from Zoro's potential lineage based on the recent chapters of One Piece and the hints that Oda may have left here and there, to the point where, no cap, to the point where we're seeing Oda over the past few months take less breaks, as far as I've noticed, and Oda is seemingly trying to get a lot more chapters out there. And since we know that Shimotsuki is the old Japanese name for November, maybe Oda has the intention of having Zoro defeat King the Wildfire in November. And it's also possible that he may do so using a two-sworded technique very fitting of a Shimotsuki. And I have always theorized that Zoro is going to lose the Sanakatetsu. It's going to break because, for me, I want Zoro to get the Niakatetsu. And since we've already gone over the fact that in most of Wano thus far, on Wano soil, he's been fighting using 2 swords, what if that's how things wind up ending off with King the Wildfire in November? It sounds crazy. It sounds mad laddish. I understand that. But Oda has left, you can argue, so many crumbs, you can combine them together and make a full cookie. But until we get the full scope, we can't just call him Shimotsuki Zoro just yet. No, we cannot do that. And once again, for me, the main thing here is, what is Asura? Asura seems to be a bit special in so many more ways than one, particularly 3. But hey, let me know your thoughts on the subject matter at hand. Be sure to rate the video if you enjoy the content at hand. Be sure to subscribe, that'd be a great help, honestly. And of course, when you do that, click on the bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna see you cats on the flip side. Be easy, stay safe, have a nice one.